So in this lesson, let's take a look on the basics of variables in Ruby. So before that, I want to open my terminal. So I'm going to click here, click on the terminal. And I'm also going to open the text editor. And I want to give you a hint. So you can go here, right click on the editor and add to favorites. And do the same for the terminal. So when you close it, you can now easily open it again. So just click it here. You don't have to open the whole menu. So yeah, after this tip, let's get started. So today we're gonna use not so much the code editor itself, but the Ruby. It's called the interactive Ruby. So it's called IRB. So just type that. And here we are. So here we have an interactive Ruby interpreter. So each line is going to be interpreted separately. So if I type, for instance, 1 plus 2, it's going to give us the result of that. If I type, for instance, hello world in double quotes, and I press enter, it is going to show that thing. And if I type in, whatever, like 2 times 9. Yeah, of course it's going to show the result. If I type in, for instance, hello space close quotes plus 2, what's going to happen? So it said type error. The interesting bit here is this last line. So type error, that means it's an error related to types. And it's saying that there's no implicit conversion of integer into string. So what we have to understand of programming languages first is that they have types. So every programming language has types, and Ruby is not different. So what it's telling here is that the error here was that it was not able to convert this 2 number here to a string. There's no implicit conversion. You have to explicitly convert it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to type again hello space plus 2 dot and then 2 underscore s. And I'm going to press enter. And now it's kind of our expected result is there. So hello 2. What I did here is that this is a string type. So a string type is essentially a piece of text. So as you can see, there are characters here. Hello could be anything, could be hello, and it could be some numbers. They are part of the text. And then some more text, spaces, symbols, anything really. So this is a string. This is what a string is. So you see here string. And how do we know that? Well, we can do double quotes and a word, and we can append to the end dot class. So I'm going to explain this whole class thing later. This is related to the fact that Ruby is an object-oriented language. But let's not go that right now because that's fairly more complicated. So for now, we knowing that dot class is gonna give us the type of the variable or the type of this value. So this thing here is a value, and it is a value of type string, and this is saying that its type is a string. And the way we do a string in Ruby is via, well, one of the ways is a double quote. So we can do like we have been doing now, hello. We can also do it via a single quote. So hello world. And as you see here, I put it in single quotes. So this is a string, and you might be asking yourself, like, okay, is this a different kind of string? And the answer is no. Is nothing different than before. It's just the way that you create this string, so to say. So you can see in the result, it is always displaying here with double quotes. So it is the same thing. And if I type it again, hello world dot class, I can see that this is still a string. And this string and this string are the same. There's no difference because you can see there's no difference. It's the same thing. Another tip that I want to give you here is, like, I typed this hello world here and then I typed it again here. So when we are using IRB this way, I can press up in my keyboard. So if I press up, this is gonna happen. So I'm gonna see the last command that I run is gonna pop up again. So I can keep pressing up, so up, 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 and it is gonna go through the history of commands that I have executed. And if I press down, it is going back. So if I press up and down, you see it's going back and forth in history. So yeah, that's just a tip, very useful, can be very useful. I'm gonna be using that from now on. So I'm gonna press now Control L. So that's Control L. I'm gonna erase that. So if I press Control L, it's gonna erase this screen. So we're gonna also use that as a tip. So there you are. So now I'm gonna do, let's say, hello plus chew, like we did before. And then of course we're gonna see that same error. Now let's press up in the keyboard to repeat the same thing, and I'm gonna erase the chew and add here, this time, hello in double quotes plus space world in single quotes. And the result I'm gonna have is just hello world. And this would be exactly the same as just doing it like that. So what this means is that I can add up strings together using the plus operator. And it doesn't matter if one string is using double quotes and the other string is using single quotes, because in the end of the day, this is a string as much as this is a string. So I'm summing up two strings together. And yes, I can do, for instance, plus, let's say this is B and this is C. I can do it like this. So I can sum up three strings or how many strings I want. So I'm gonna press again Control L on my keyboard to clear the screen. And now let's see something. What happened there with the chew? So if I press chew, I get a chew as the result. But if I do like A plus chew, I get an error. So it doesn't work. Now what if I type in chew between double quotes? What is gonna happen? So it's the same thing, right? Let's see. Yeah, they're not the same thing. So you see that this one, the first one, is in double quotes here. This means it is a string. And this here is without any quotes. So this means that this is, let's check what it means. So chew point class, what does it do? Oh, integer. And let's say chew between quotes dot class, what does it say? String. And now we see something here. So no implicit conversion of integer, which is this one, into string, which is this one. So what does this mean? This means that if I do like hello plus chew, it means that chew here is an integer value, as we see here. So chew is an integer. If I do it like this, then this chew is no longer interpreted as a number. So it's not a number at all. It is a string. So it's a text. But if I remove the quotes, now this is a number, or more precisely, this is an integer number. And what this error is telling us is that Ruby does not know how to convert this integer into a string. So what's happening here is that on the left side of this equation or of this formula, we see a string and then the symbol plus. So when this plus is there, it is saying sum up this string with whatever comes next here to the right. And a string, it does not expect anything that is not a string on the right. It expects either something that is a string or that is automatically conversible or convertible, I don't know, coercible to a string. And the integer is not. So what we can do here is we can transform, like we did before, the to into a string. So this toS means to string. And actually this, I think it does not exist. Yeah, no, it does not exist. So it's toS. And now we see that this happens. And why does this happen? Because if I do 2.2s, you see that now this is a string. How do I know that? I know that because of the double quotes. If I want to prove to you that better, I can go further and add a dot class here. So I'm going to see that this is actually a string. And if I remove this, yeah, I'm going to have the integer as I had before. So this is pretty much an introduction to types. So this is very important, and this is also very basic stuff. So we saw here two types of Ruby. We saw strings and we saw integers. So now what about if we do, for instance, hello? I think hello is kind of boring, isn't it? I'm gonna say that, let's say my height. So height is, so height, I'm let's say I'm 1.7 meters tall, 1.70. So these now, what's gonna happen? If I do like this, now the error is slightly different, and it's saying that, so it's just replace integer by float. And let's try these. Oh yeah, it worked. Look at that. But it removed the 0 from the end. You see, 1.70, 1.7. Well, what's happening here is that now this is, as you might have guessed, this is a float. So what is a float? A float is a floating point number. It has this name because of the way it is stored in memory. So if you want to search for it, like floating, if you put on Google or something, you put their floating point number, you're gonna find a full specification on how it works. Maybe there's a page on Wikipedia for it, but I would say, unless you have spare time, don't overthink about this. This is just what really matters here is that this is a number with digits after the decimal places. So I showed you strings. So hello is a string, to is an integer. I showed you 1 point whatever, 2 point whatever, and this is a float. You can, of course, also do negative numbers, and a negative number is, in this case, going to be an integer. And if it has a fractional part, it is going to be a float. And yeah, you can sum up integers together. You can do all kinds of math with it. So times, you can do, I think this is power, so 2 to the power of 19. You can also do like floats times integer. So 2.5 is an integer. Sorry, it's a float, and 19 is an integer. And you can do that just fine, and it works. You can do plus anything. Of course, since you are or you can do the other way around, and it's going to be the same thing. Of course, this is an integer and this is a float. If you sum them together, there's no way an integer can have this value. So of course, this is going to be converted to a float. How do we know that? Well, we could put in here point class. However, we need to put these between parentheses, because otherwise this class thing here would be applied to the 2.5. And then the type of this whole thing, I should remove this. So the type of this thing would be a class of itself. And this would be an error. So yeah, you need to use this. And you can see here it's a float. However, if there is no fractional part, this is going to be an integer. So far so good. Something else that I show you is that you can convert using the point to s. You can convert these to a string. So what if I said like 3 plus 5 is 8, right? Now, what is 3 string plus 5 string? There you go, it's 35, right? No, it's not 35. It's a string with the contents 3, 5. You see? Another way to do this would be to convert them. So these are numbers. And now I'm going to convert them to strings. So what is happening here? Well, it is getting this 3 value, and then it is saying to string, which means convert this thing to a string. And this is going to happen before the addition is made. And then the same thing for the 5, which is all as well, it is going to happen before the addition. So after it has these two things converted, but before the addition is performed, this is going to be exactly the same thing that is being done here. It's going to be a string 3, a string 5, and they're going to be summed up together, but they're going to be summed up together as strings. They're never going to be automatically converted to integers. Ruby is never going to do that. Now, we see here that we have, let's put in parentheses, and we see that we have the string 35. How do we know that? Yeah, we can see there. And now what we can do, we can convert this string to a string. Does it make sense? No, it didn't change anything, but it's possible to do. And you can do that multiple times without any problem. So that's not very useful, but what is useful here is to do to I. And to I, it is gonna change to integer. So this is gonna convert this thing to an integer. Isn't that nice? And also, now what is this gonna do? That's exactly what you thought. It is gonna change this to a float. And you can do this, you can use this whatever you want. So 9, for instance. 9 is an integer. You can do to string to convert it to a string. You can do to float to convert it to a float. And if you take, for instance, 45.5 and convert it to an integer, of course you're going to lose some precision, because an integer has no means of storing the fractional part. And as you see here, no matter how large you put in here, it is always going to round it down. I wonder what is going to happen if I do like this. Yeah, it is always going to round. Looks like it's always going to round closer to 0. So -1 is closer to 0 than -2. Well, you got the idea. And this is what I wanted to teach you in this lesson. So you learned strings, you learned integers, and you learned floats, and you learned the methods to s, which means to a string, and you learned the method to I, which converts to an integer, and you also learned the to f, although these parentheses here, none of them are necessary. So this was an integer, and then it was converted to a string, and the result of this, which is a string, was then converted to an integer, which then was converted to a float. And now we see here that in fact it is a float. So much for this lesson. See you next time.